All right, welcome back to LTC Heroes Live by Experience Care. My name is Peter Murphy Lewis. I'm your host. Today I'm at the Nebraska Healthcare Convention Day 2, and I am talking to an entrepreneur who likes to talk about the same thing as me, marketing. Brent Comstock is the founder and CEO at BCom Solutions. Brent, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Give me 1 second, Brent, just making sure the audio is cutting out. All right, I think I got you. Brent, I've gone through your profile, seen some of your articles online, went to your website. You have a very big resume for a very young person. Tell me about how you got into marketing.
Yeah, well, certainly it feels a lot longer than maybe it has been, but for the better part of the last 9 years, a lot of my work has been focused on marketing, particularly to rural and disconnected communities. That's included rural communities in Nebraska. That's included political campaigns that are maybe struggling to reach disconnected voters. It's really spread across the country. We've done work in dozens of states, and we're still proud to call Nebraska home.
Well, I want to know your origin story. When did you realize that you could make a difference?
In 1995, I grew up in a small town, and like most people in rural communities, like you very much so have if you don't do it, someone else won't. So you've got to do it. So if you want to have a marketing company, there's not 14 marketing companies to go pursue. I wasn't particularly seeking out a marketing company, but I was, when we were building our company, we wanted to be able to provide services that we considered to be essential to rural communities. And we thought that every business and every nonprofit and every political campaign that serves Nebraska and Kansas and the Midwest and the East and West Coast, like all of those rural communities deserve the access to the same resources. So we've in turn built a world-class marketing and communications agency right from here. And we've done it over the course of the last 9 years.
That's cool. I want to pause on the importance that I think is your target population, which is rural, right? Yeah. I went to your homepage, and it was very clear that who you work with and that you have a specific way that you help them. That has to be completely different than being from a metropolitan area or having a metropolitan customer base. Tell me how it differs in either what they ask or how you explain it. Yeah. Obviously, budget's going to be different, and your methodology is probably different given that the budget's different.
Yeah, so people ask that question all the time, and we definitely have clients in rural and urban metro areas. So it's not that we don't know how to or that we can't. I think the biggest thing in this particular space is, we recognize what it's like to operate with scarce resources. If there's one grocery store in the town, if there's one company that provides a service. Similarly, budgets are generally smaller in rural communities. And so what I tell people, and particularly our urban clients, and people, we work with media companies in New York and DC and LA, and it's like, it's really easy to put a blanket strategy in place that targets every person ages 30 to 40 in New York City. It's pretty obvious. You can find research, you can find all this stuff. When you're putting together a strategy to target rural healthcare graduates in Southeast Nebraska to try and get them to become a CNA or an RN or a nurse practitioner, like that requires both understanding of the people and the understanding of marketing. And that's like kind of how we've carved out our niche.
Can you give me an example of how your ads, and specifically helping with the staffing situation, your copy and what you put is different when you're speaking to a rural population? Because I'm from a town of 2,000 people in Kansas. I agree 100% what you're saying. I've just never met an entrepreneur who focuses on rural. Yeah. So can you give some examples of how your copy to Omaha would be different than a town of 3,000 people?
Well, certainly. And I think it's a matter of putting together and putting in place a strategy that when they see it, they don't have to establish connection. They already feel that connection. If that's in copy, great. What we found in the healthcare industry is like if you're doing copy, if you're doing a strategy for people in healthcare in Omaha versus Auburn, Nebraska, a big difference is how you demonstrate and visualize that. Like if you show a medical center that has 75 stories in the hospital, like The Nemaha County Hospital in Auburn, Nebraska is one story. It's a world-class facility. It's a terrific facility. But if you're trying to recruit people to come work somewhere, you've got to be authentic. And so we've done that in the healthcare industry. We've also done that in rural North Carolina with a lot of education and journalism entities, like seeking out people in these communities that generally aren't targeted, and now they're getting these ads and they're genuine, so they're seeing success, whether that's signups for an event, signups for a fellowship, signups for a job. Maybe it's converting them to become donors or customers, but that authenticity like is the core of that part.
The convention that you and I are at is around innovation this week, and I know that you're passionate about disrupting and also innovation. How do you approach that terminology and think about disruption?
Well, certainly we don't shy away from it, and I think that's, we've been doing this for 9 years. I have lived in a rural community for more than 9 years, living in Lincoln now, but still I'm spending a lot of time in rural communities, and people in rural communities are very direct. They're probably more humble, I would argue, and maybe they generally don't see things as maybe rigid as like a corporate environment. Like, I wouldn't put Omaha or Lincoln in it, but like Chicago or New York or DC. But they also have their relationships are built on trust. And so if you come in and you try and present that you want to do this little thing over here when really you're trying to do this macro change, if you're not honest from the beginning, I think you're going to really struggle to see success. Now, that doesn't mean that you give them all the information at once, and it doesn't mean they shirk away from it. I think the way that we approach it is very similar to how we approach the messaging we do with political candidates, which is like, yes, you identify as left, or you identify as right, or you identify as a man, or you identify as a woman, or you identify, like there's all these different labels you can put on people. But at the end of the day, the question that I always ask is, who's on the receiving end of that message? And how do we make sure that whatever we're building, whatever video or targeted ad or email campaign, resonates the most with the people on the receiving end, not on the ones that are doing the production?
I would assume that when you talk to bigger players, they probably look down upon rural companies who need your support. But I bet you've seen some rural companies do some magic with their messaging. Can you think of any examples? It doesn't have to be in healthcare, but an example that if someone's watching this and they have a small mom and pop nursing home in Northeast Nebraska, some simple basics that you can do being an agile, small, rural company.
Well, I think there are a ton of examples of that. And honestly, I would present examples that are probably larger than what they would think, because that's often, I think, an assumption that the size of the company or the organization equals the size of where their marketing strategy should be. Surely the budgets are different. But this idea that like now a mom and pop nursing home or a healthcare facility in wherever they may be, they now have access in this understanding and resources. You can run a Facebook ad campaign. You can run a funny video campaign that maybe leverages the people that you're serving, whether they're patients or whether they're residents or whether they're customers. Use those people in the ads. And I think a lot of times in healthcare and in education and in industries that are more regulated, we try and whitewash it and we try and make it, very clean and sterile. Yes, there needs to be professionalism. Yes, there needs to be standards that are followed. Absolutely, 100%. We work in the political industry. We're used to putting a lot of gloss on things, but make it fun and enjoyable. And that was part of the message that I shared today was, this is a hard industry. It's a tough industry. I mean, I know that from personal experience, not working in it, but having family members that go through it, and you walk away and you think like, one, two, how do these people remain energized? And if you don't have fun with it in your marketing campaigns or in the work that you're doing, I think you struggle to sustain that.
I sense that from my notes and my research that you're interested in the relationship between youth and senior communities through communication, through collaboration. Can you tell me why that's important to you and how you go about helping nursing homes in that and with that collaboration?
Yeah. Well, I will not go into the details of, one, because we don't have time, and two, because everyone here already heard it. So if you weren't here, sorry. But I I started a company when I was not yet an adult. I did not have a college degree. I did not know a lot of things. I couldn't rent a car. I couldn't drink a beer. I couldn't, go on and on and on. And people ask like, oh, so was it like, were you a rocket scientist? And like, no. What I really had were some terrific mentors that helped build our company. And those were people that were all, whether they were 20 years older than me, 40 years older than me, or 5 years older than me, they were all people that didn't care about my age from the older to the younger. And so I just grew up in the professional world with this question of like, why is it that if I'm younger, then I need to think about, it in a way that's like, we need to separate these demographics. It certainly causes challenges too, particularly when things go wrong. It's easy as human beings to immediately like rely on our personal relationships with people. And so you're like, oh, well, they haven't had as much experience, so that's why that happened. Like that happens a lot. But I really encourage my team. I encourage our customers. I encourage young people that I mentor that are going to school, like find mentors that can help and build you up. And those people are generally a significant amount older.
Brent, I love that you said mentors. It's how I also build up my company and got to where I am. I've received much more input and knowledge from those people than other sources. When you have a client or a prospect who needs your help, but either one can't afford you or two, they say, yeah, I'm still going to hire you, but I want to learn. I want to make sure that some of this is coming in-house. Where do you tell people to start? Because the marketing world is such an ocean, and people go to Twitter, they go to Google, they get caught in bad blogs because of someone's great at SEO. Where do you send people to get started?
Well, I send them to our website. No, I think one, there is a ton of information out there. I really like finding local companies or local competitors that I think are doing really well, because then that gives me some sense of collegiality and some sense of like community. And then I think the other thing is like, it's a time thing. Like you can go and follow 47,000 people on, Medium or Twitter, or, follow Substack stuff. But I would say over time, we have found, probably for the different industries we work in, we've found probably 10 to 20 different blogs, digests, and things like that. And I could list off who those are, but those are very specific to us. What we figured out is like, it just takes time to identify who are the people that both give you the best tactical advice and that you can most associate with the industry you work in.
I want to ask you, what is the tech that you find rural communities need to embrace? At the early stages of the one that you try to get them at least to understand or grasp. I don't know if it's going to be ads. I don't know if your answer is going to be text messaging. I'm interested in kind of what stage one and then what stage two, as someone starts to understand the marketing tech stack they can play with.
I think before you go into the platforms, an understanding of goal is really important. Like, are you trying to just reach people in the community? Sometimes people are like, oh, we did a Christmas card from our staff and we want everyone to see it. How do we do that? Then that's easy. Target an ad and put a bunch of money behind it, or put no money behind it, put $10 behind it. I think a lot of times people jump to the conclusion that if they know what success looks like in their mind, and then they hire a firm, or then they go to the source, that immediately it's fixed, because it's tech, it's digital. You just type a bunch of things and then it happens, right? It's no different than if you were putting together a billboard, or if you were putting together a TV ad, or if you're putting together a classified in the county newspaper. Like, you would spend time digging into it, investing in it, you would research it, you would proof it, asking all those questions. Those same things I think are really important. So level one is like making sure people understand, like, what is your goal, and can what we do or what they're looking for, can that tool or platform accomplish it? And then I think the next layer is, do they have an understanding of the amount of time it takes to get there? Because a lot of times we're like, oh, I've run the ad for 2 days and I don't have any applicants. I need to turn off and I spent $200. Well, at this rate, I'm going to spend $100 a day and get 0 applicants. Like, that type of, you've got to educate so that you can do the work that you need to do. And I think educating those people is very important.
Brent, we're going to go to a quick break. And when we come back, I want to ask you about some of the lessons you've learned from your travels across the U.S., interacting with other rural or urban settings. So we'll be right back. All right, confession time. Yes, I host the LTC Heroes podcast, and hopefully you know that by now, but I can't take all the credit. Jason Long, the CEO of Experience Care, told me 2 years ago when we started this show that this new audio platform had to create value for everyone, whether you're a client of Experience Care's electronic healthcare records or not. He then encouraged me to become a CNA to really help LTC Heroes resonate with caregivers and leaders. And between me and you, he really knew what he was talking about. LTC Heroes has been invited to almost 10 conventions this year alone to finally shine a light on what leaders like you have been doing for decades. It's that sort of knowledge in the industry that really makes me appreciate Experience Care, which has developed customizable and intuitive EHR that makes clinical, financial, and billing processes more efficient and accurate. It transforms workflows into something that makes sense so you can focus on what really matters, caring about your residents. The software is used by assisted living, SNFs, and CCRCs, big and small facilities alike. Countless users have reached out and shared with me that it's really effective in helping them improve their outcomes. I can honestly say that I know my parents would be proud to learn that I work at a place like Experience Care. Brent, I'm guessing you're well-traveled, even though you're probably 15 years younger than me. Tell me some of the lessons you've learned from interacting from other states, other small communities, and that what you could bring back to Nebraska and help them learn and implement.
Yeah, well, I have traveled a fair amount, mostly for work, which is kind of, it's different because now you go to these places and like, oh, did you go to XYZ attraction? You're like, no, I went to the XYZ Courtyard Marriott Conference Center. But, one of the things that I've recognized is, and more so both in rural communities, but also, I've spent a fair amount of time in New York and DC and California. And it's very easy for us as people that work in marketing who, in my case, like I own a marketing company that's headquarters is in a town that, it has one airport with one airline to 3 destinations, right? Like I'm not, when I walk into a room, it's easy for me to be like, oh, they own XYZ global marketing agency. Over time, we've become, competitive in that respect. But even when we were building and when we were arguably smaller, one of the things I observed traveling the country is like, the world is saturated with people that can tell you a good story. The ones that I'm most interested in are the ones that are the most authentic and the most genuine. And so traveling across the country, that's what I love. I love hearing from people. I love hearing about those things. I love when we get to meet with clients. I go and travel to clients, sometimes for not a finite reason other than the fact that they just want to put a face to the name and they want to have a relationship with someone. And I think that's compelling.
As we wrap up, Brent, my last question for you is: what advice do you have for nursing homes or for operators or vendors that are like, I need to improve my staffing situation, or I need to improve my census? Where do they start?
One, you are the experts in the industry. I am not. But one of the things in prepping for this conference and in talking to the staff at the Nebraska Healthcare Association, look, the facilities and the organizations that people run are often perceived as the nursing home and the assisted living where people nearing the end of their life end up. And another way to look at that is you are an economic engine that literally associates with the beginning of life and the end of life, beginning when the grandkids and the CNAs that are going to high school, they get their CNA certification, that want to become a nurse and they're going to do a job in between, or they're going to go to community college. Like you are at the beginning, you're at the middle when the parents are putting their parents and the grandparents in, and you're there at the end. And so similar to how I tell rural broadband companies that, like, yes, they're providing internet and people generally only remember their name when they're swearing them out because their router goes out, unplug it and plug it back in. What you're doing is you're providing connection to the outside world. And for these facilities and for the members of this association and probably the people that follow this production, it's easy. And like, obviously you can't just run around and bang beat on your chest and say, oh, I am the economic engine of the community, and then not do any of the work. But I wouldn't forget that. And I think there's a lot of people that maybe the top people in these organizations are so busy that they can't participate in a board or a group or a nonprofit, or because they can't physically leave the space. Right? Like there's a lot of people that like they're an administrator doing 14 jobs. Like I can't take an hour from 12 to 1 to go to this thing because I've got another thing at 12 to 1. So my solution is invite them to your place. If you're the number one economic provider of the community, or the number 2 or 3, or definitely one of the top ones, like invite them in, and think about yourself more from that perspective, because then they'll see and understand the importance of the organization.
I think that's good advice. I will remember that. You don't hear that a lot from marketers. Marketers always thinking out, and you're saying listen first. There's a simple survey situation that's going to have an impact in getting your message out. Brent, thank you for joining LTC Heroes. It's a pleasure. Hopefully, I'll meet you back at the conference next year. Thanks for your words of advice.
Yeah, thank you.
Want to connect with leaders in long-term care? Go to www.ltcheroes.com to join our community on Facebook and LinkedIn. Get exclusive access to marketing tips, SOPs, and insights from prominent voices in the industry. Only at ltcheroes.com.